AUS Silver Jubilee Podcast, presented by the MCM Department and the College of Arts and Sciences. Silver Jubilee Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to our podcast. Today, I have a special guest, Mr. Hamid Jafar, who is a member of the AUS Board of Trustees and the Chairman and CEO of Crescent Petroleum Company. Thank you for joining me today, Mr. Jafar.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so let me begin by asking you, how long have you been on the Board of Trustees?
Since its inception, which means, I'm not sure precisely if you ask me when was the Board of Trustees or precisely which month it had its first meeting, I wouldn't be able to recall offhand. But since its inception.
So you've been there from the beginning?
From the beginning. I've seen it all from that perspective.
Well, do you remember something about the early board meetings when the university was just getting started?
Yes, the most significant thing really is the way the boards were constituted. So, His Highness was the driver of, obviously, visionary and driver of AUS.
Of course.
And his ethos from the start, so when he engaged management effectively, his ethos was, I'm not going to interfere in the academic program. It's not for me to do. However, I'm going to design the buildings, so I have a lot to say about the outside look and feel, but internally, I leave it entirely up to the administration. So that same ethos carried through to formation of the board. So the AUS board is atypical from most other universities. Boards, for example, of AUB are huge, really, in comparison, 30, 40 people. And they focus really on members who are potential donors a lot of the time to build up the endowment. And that ethos is practiced in many universities. His Highness, however, he valued most till today that board members are senior academics with academic experience that can guide the university. So even going back to the first board meeting, he being chair, wanted to consult all the time and have advice from board members to give him direction and provide direction to the administration of the university on academic matters and on how American-style universities ought to be run. So that has carried all the way through, and on that basis, the original board members were actually selected, apart from a few local members, I being one, who added, if you like, a local flavor.
A true visionary.
Yeah, he certainly was, yes. And it is.
Since you told us a little bit about the early days of how your board meetings went, can you tell me about the early days as in your experience and role in the formative years of AUS?
So it carries on in the same light, really. My own experience and contribution was really back from the outset. Perhaps I could describe how AUS got off the ground, how His Highness got it off the ground. One day, we were actually in his palace, and he said, Hamid, jump into my car. He was driving, it was a four-wheel drive, and he drove through this area, which was all sand dunes. And he said, that's where I'm going to build a university. Interesting. I said, where? And I told you I'm an engineer, for example, I'm not an architect. I can't visualize anything easily. So he had an amazing vision. He says, here, I'm going to put it on top of that hill. And in fact, I'm going to create a university city. That was it. That was amazing. So I said, that's very interesting. And actually, another time, not soon after, again I went, and he'd already mapped out the boulevard. And other than a dirt fairway. It obviously wasn't built or constructed. And he had instructed palm trees alongside to be planted, and water tankers were coming in to water them. He said, because when it's finished, and I want the whole thing to be finished within 1 year, the palm trees will be established already. So,
wow.
So that was the early days. And then on the academic side, His Highness enlisted AUB initially to come and advise on the academic programs and this initial setup. And the person involved was Dr. Hamid D, whom AUB had nominated and virtually seconded to come to Sharjah and start the progress. He was energetic. He was in constant liaison with His Highness, and His Highness asked me to give him an office at Crescent. So we set up an office there for him. I don't know why he asked for him to be located at Crescent initially, at least. So that was set up, and up to the opening, in fact, of the university, that was the epicenter, if you like, of the foundation of AUS until AUS had built this remarkable building, or these buildings, and he located here. This is Abdul Hamid Halab. He was designated as His Highness's advisor on higher education. He also became the first, I forget his title, but like an interim chancellor of the university.
I see.
And even hiring staff and initial faculty, etc., all was conducted out of his office at Crescent. So that was done, and as I said, from the outset, he said, His Highness, that you're the experts on academic affairs. I'm not going to interfere. And he said, till our last board meeting, that was his ethos in that respect never changed, always on that basis. And other things happened as a result. For example, and His Highness would cite it many times in meetings that he had, there were, in the first intake of students, the administration had put as a pass mark, in consultation with His Highness, for intake as being 70% of high school, and that was, the first intake. And 2 students apparently had applied from the family, and the administration, Dr. Halab, I remember, went to His Highness, said, two members of the Qasimi family, one has 65% and the other one is 68%. And it's not unusual for American presidents of universities to have a leeway of 1 or 2% for various reasons. It could be athletic, it could be whatever, donor related. They make small exceptions. And so if Your Highness would like to make an exception in this regard, and His Highness said, absolutely not, you reject them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
One wouldn't expect that.
That's right. Interestingly, because I it's normal, would get calls. People saw me associated somehow in the initial phases of the university. Although I had nothing to do with what AUB and Dr. Halab were doing. So I used to get calls of basically wasta. And then I would give this example, and then they stopped.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The moment they hear that, they're bound to stop.
Yes, exactly. So it established the ethos, and it continued. It made it a lot easier and so on. So he left basically everything up to the administration. The only exception was security.
Yes.
And he's, as the ruler always says, he guards the security. He holds AUS and the universities close to his heart. And the security for AUS is actually under the command of his own palace guard. So anything happens, he immediately gets a report.
Well, that's excellent to hear. How did it feel being part of this process of seeing AUS come to life?
It was obviously very gratifying. That encapsulates the feeling, really.
Could you tell me some more of your fondest memories from those early days?
Well, there were many fond memories. It's difficult to necessarily pick one. There were some difficult times. For example, the pressure that was put on because the experiment was the first of its kind, not only in the UAE, in the whole region, of having a co-educational higher education institution.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So there were quite a few skirmishes, I could call them.
That's one way to put it.
in that regard, which His Highness really fought gallantly, you know. He's obviously a very sensitive person in terms of, making sure that he gives good regard to opinion and public opinion, but at the same time, he very adroitly, overcome all these obstacles. And so that, for example, I think it was a fond memory in the way to see how that issue, regional public issue, was tackled.
Now that we've heard about your early days with the Board of Trustees and AUS and His Highness, could you describe to us your current role as a Board of Trustee member?
As I explained earlier, I'm not an academic. I fulfilled a role of, as it developed, of ensuring there has been integration among board members, almost to the extent which other board members have used. A camaraderie has established, and it's not easy when you have 3 meetings a year. People come together, and they're all very busy from far and wide, from the US and from Britain, and occasionally we've had people from the East to come and positively contribute and communicate with one another, which is vital, rather than just arriving and almost out of the blue and contributing in the way that they are meant to. And so, as one person recently described it, one trustee recently described it, he said, you perform the function of, I don't want to self-ingratiate, but it's not really one of self-ingratiation, is to say, a go-between in some way, like a glue.
Oh.
He used the word glue. Yeah.
So you hold each other together.
Yeah, in a way, yes, encourage, when they come, ensure that they are entertained well also, that they communicate well with one another. From the outset, within that atmosphere, if you like, once a year, from the outset, we introduced the idea of one board meeting, we would invite the spouses to join. And that created
That's lovely.
more of a camaraderie among friendships, basically, among board members, which made it easier for them to communicate with one another. That's really my role. And to pass messages back and forth with His Highness. Although I was very careful never to provide, suggest decisions or anything like that. We stuck very closely and not rigidly to His Highness's ethos from the outset.
Of course.
Yeah. And his role was basically as chairman of the board. And he thought the title of president was also very important because it gave the university regional respect with him being the president and in charge.
I mean, seeing as how AUS is viewed from an outsider's perspective,
yes,
it's a very well-esteemed university. And I'm sure every student here feels very lucky and happy to be part of it.
The most gratifying aspect today, when you're asking in the context of your question, is that for me to see, and I think that applies to all the board members, is that the graduates are the most valued among employers. And that sort of reputation doesn't get built overnight.
Our alumni are one of a kind.
Yes.
Really, yes.
Yes.
That's good to hear. While we've discussed the structure and initiatives of the Board of Trustees, could you tell us what you think are the key factors that have led to the success of AUS over the years?
The aspect of sticking to the ethos and the rules and the non-interference with the administration, both from the standpoint of selection of very important faculty, as well as staff, etc. In a word, no wasta. Okay, because that can spoil it's sort of can corrupt the basis in a sense. That was very strictly adhered to by His Highness. And everybody has that message and
it's clear.
Sticks to it. It's very clear.
Well, looking into the future, where do you hope to see AUS in 5 to 10 years?
To develop more research angle, because having excelled on the undergraduate teaching level, it's really important for any university to develop in that direction. And that impacts reputation all the way through. But without, as the board members really say, but without in any way impacting negatively on the excellence of undergraduate teaching. You find some universities, they focus so much on research. That the undergraduate teaching aspect
lacks a little bit.
Yes, exactly. So that is the number one hope can develop. And I would hope that the country itself would develop more in that. As a policy, the leadership talks about that. But what is lacking now, and I think I know it's being reviewed and studies, it needs to be accelerated, having a national research foundation to fund research. There are so many universities now in the UAE, but to fund research based on competition. As research is funded in the US, and Britain, and Japan. So that's what I'd like to see AUS develop in the next 5, certainly 10 years, yeah.
Inshallah. Do you foresee any challenges on the way to that initiative?
Yes, of course. Other than, of course, hiring the right people, because you're now talking about a different aspect altogether. At the moment, faculty have a lot of loads to teach in an undergraduate sense. It's different when you're talking about hiring faculty with research capability, many of whom already exist, but they need to have, as I know from the discussions within the board, more free time, if you like, to do research, and therefore less teaching load. So that's a challenge, how you do the mix. And then, of course, funding. But His Highness has kick-started the funding process internally, from within the resources of the Sharjah government.
Well, thank you for the insightful challenges. As we conclude, is there anything special you'd like to share with the AUS community as we celebrate the Silver Jubilee of the university?
Well, it's a wonderful event, clearly. It's a wonderful year, and I think a great deal has been done, great programs, some of which I've participated in throughout the year. And onward and forward, I would say, and let's look forward to the 50th anniversary. Forward it is. Yes. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you for inviting me.
AUS Silver Jubilee Podcast, presented by the MCM Department and the College of Arts and Sciences. Silver Jubilee Podcast.